Okay, we want to continue our look at things we're calling modes of inheritance, right? This relationship between the genotype and how the final phenotype may appear and look. And of course, we're dealing with ratios and other things. Um, we have talked about simple Mendelian dominant recessive. We talked about codominant, incomplete dominance, and we went off on a bit about multiple alleles and variants. Now I want to talk a bit about those that are related to our sex, right? So individuals that are divided into males and females and the types of modes of inheritance that directly relate to those, okay? So these are the sort of the sex-related modes of inheritance. And what we're going to talk about here is the way the alleles are expressed, the loci are expressed, is affected by the sex of the individual. Now there are two ways. There can be a direct way or sort of an indirect way. The direct way is where basically once the sex is determined, the expression of whatever genotype you get is sort of conditioned based on that sex, right? This is one of those conditional discussions that we had when we talked about lethals. But in this case, it's not lethal. We're talking about, okay, I get this genotype. If I'm a male, I may express it one way, or if I'm a female, I may express it in another way. That's sort of the direct way. The indirect way is when it's the locus that we're talking about controlling whatever trait we're dealing with is actually carried on a sex chromosome. So it's actually traveling with some other pieces of genetic code that are telling me to be male and female. And that drives a completely different way that those interactions, it's not really conditioning it, it's actually as part of the way it's being carried and available to be expressed. So just to kind of bring us a big picture here, let's think about when we think about primary sex characteristics, right, the presence and absence of reproductive organs and those things, there are also many of the phenotypic variants that we think about are actually secondary sex characteristics. Like there may be coloration, right, is one of them. Size can be another. We have lots of different things that occur. In this case, we've got this little individual here that's looks like it's going to be a very cryptic coloration in a female that's occurring here. We can have elaborate coloration that might occur here in this male versus this female. So you may have what's called sexual dimorphism and expression of color, and it can not only be in color but in size. These are little small fishes. These are probably Cyprinella. I think this is Lutrensis here, and when they go into breeding phase, the males come onto these bright colors that look something like this. Okay. And the females remain both smaller and with much less coloration going on. So we have sexual dimorphism there expressed. And it could go the other way. These are Gambusia, live-bearing fishes. And in these particular species, the females are the very much larger ones and the males are much smaller. These are pretty interesting little guys. They're called ovoviviparous reproduction. So what happens in these guys is that the male introduces sperm to the female physically inside. In many other fishes, it's simply a broadcast system, right? The female comes along, the male may prepare a nest or something, or the female, but they lay in eggs. The males come along and they broadcast sperm into the water. In these live bearers, you actually have an intermittent organ. The anal fin has been modified into what's called a gonopodium, and sperm will move down a center track of that gonopodium, which is inserted into the female. And then the female will have eggs. Those eggs will be fertilized, but she'll retain them and actually develop those eggs from their yolk sacs internally. And then once the young are ready to be born, they'll be born. And it's a pretty cool system. But in this particular case, the females are in fact much larger than the males, right? So we have all this sexual dimorphism that can go on in these characteristics. And then, we move up to mammals and things. Mammals are very big issue for reproduction in particular, because the females generally do the gestation, right? They carry the young throughout the whole term, and then probably the biggest energy drain on female mammals is lactation, just as much of a drain as the actual gestation time. So the demands on a male mammal versus a female mammal are very different, and so certainly the environmental flow, the way that the energy is used, and all of that. Okay, so these all are related in many ways to these sort of modes of inheritance that we're going to talk about. Now we're going to start out talking about what are called autosomal loci. Okay, you have two sets of loci in many systems, and not all, but in many systems, and certainly in humans, you have these sex chromosomes down here, and then you have everything else. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the sex chromosomes in this lecture. We're going to talk about those later. We're going to concentrate on loci that are found being carried around on these autosomes everywhere else. Okay, and that's important because autosomally everybody gets two copies, right? So you get one homolog from mom, one homolog from dad. You don't have to worry about mom just giving you something and dad not giving you anything, as we'll see in sex chromosomes. We get two copies. So even though it's dealing with sex, it's not, genotypically, it's just Mendel's big six. We just got a nice little monohybrid system. But what's going to happen is that whatever sex you are determined by these sex chromosomes is going to influence what's going on up here, right? Okay, now there's two modes of inheritance that I want to talk about, and they are called sex limited is one of them. Okay, and people get these confused, and they shouldn't, because they're named exactly for what they do, right? Sex limited, it's a trait that is expressed in only one sex. Even though both sexes can carry the alleles, and in fact will carry both alleles, only one sex will have it. Either the males will express it or the females, and we'll give an example in just a moment. And the other that people confuse it with is called sex influenced. So you influence something, you don't limit it, you just influence it, right? And what this means is that both sexes will have the trait, but it won't be expressed the same way in both sexes, right? So in sex limited, only one sex expresses it, even though everybody gets the same genes. In sex influenced, everybody gets the same genes, but the males and the females don't express it the same way. So let's think about sex limited. One of the classic examples of this is feathering in fowl. You have, well, often as we have this sort of simple feathering that occurs most commonly in females, and then you have what's called cock feathering that occurs in males. And it's much more elaborate types of feathering, part of this display. You certainly see it in things, birds, which have these big display systems where the males develop, etc. This is very often, not always, but very often a sex-limited trait. So if we compare the males and females, what we see in this case might be something like this. There's hen feathering, it's called. Okay, if you're homozygous hen feathering, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, you're going to end up being hen feathered, right? Because that's all you've got. You don't have any genetic information to make you into this cock feathering. Same thing happens, it turns out, in this case, with hen feathering, because it's a dominant. So it's dominant over cock feathering, both males and females. Where the difference comes in is when you get down here to homozygous individuals for cock feathering. Well, the males exhibit the elaborate feathering, right, that they should. The females, though, because of their sex, don't express it because of the types of hormones that are expressed around. They don't actually express it, right? Some simple examples might be the fact that every human, we're being mammals, we have the genes, the genetic information to lactate, right, to produce milk. But half of us males will generally never lactate because we never developed the plumbing to do that, nor the hormonal control later on when we actually have to lactate. We don't have it. All of us, every human has the ability to produce testes. Okay, but we don't. We direct off and we don't produce testes because we don't actually have the genetic system that tells us to do that, right? We don't have the hormonal control. And so these are limited. They can be considered sex-limited types of modes, and there are many of these, okay? Now, you won't see a lot of examples or problems with sex-limited. Mostly you'll see them about what's the next one, which is called sex-influenced. A classic example, and I'm a poster child for this, is male pattern baldness. Okay, many people think male pattern, and there are several forms, but classic male pattern baldness is sex influenced. Okay, and what you have this is you have what's known as bald and non-bald, or hairy, or unfortunately some books call it bald and normal. Okay, I don't view it as normal myself. I think, if you look at it from my perspective, we've been evolving away from hairy conditions, these hairy Neanderthals and other things. And so less and less hair is a more evolutionarily advanced condition. So we've got these evolutionary advanced bald people, and then we've got these slightly unfortunate hairy people, okay? And that's one of the ways to look at it. So, but to get to the genetics of it, okay, if we take males and females, if you receive two normal or non-balding alleles, you're going to have hair, right? That's the way it works, right? If you receive the balding allele, now both males and females are going to be bald, okay? Now, and even in this case, though, the females are generally less bald than the males. This is a full bald male right here, or I am as well, okay? But they will be bald. And now these males will generally bald fairly early. The females will just get some spots on the back or hair loss, and usually much later on in life, but they still exhibit the balding allele. Okay. Now, where the big difference comes in is here in the heterozygotes. So you get a balding mutation and a normal mutation. So you get one from one parent and one from the other. It doesn't matter if it comes from mom or dad. Okay, it's none of this mother's grandfather or anything. Don't worry about that. Just worry about what parents. The balding becomes a dominant in the males and they will bald, and it's a recessive in the females, so they don't generally show any pattern of balding. Okay. Now, big difference here between sex limited. In sex limited, none of the females would bald, right? Only males would, or vice versa, whatever the trait was. Here, both sexes, males and females, will bald, but particularly when you look at the heterozygotes, they don't bald. Okay, so you have a big difference there. All right. So what we're talking about here is some code words that are often show up called where baldness is dominant in males but recessive in females. Okay. Or you could say it the other way: normal or non-bald is dominant in females, but it's a recessive in males. And that goes back to those lectures a while back when we said you got to know carefully what you're talking about when you say dominant versus recessive. Recessive means you need two copies, right? Dominant means you only need one copy to express it. So in this case, baldness is a recessive in females, but it is a dominant in males, right? Because you only need one copy in males, but you need two. Non-balding is just the reverse. And that's often a code system that you'll see when you work these out, okay? Now, I want to point something out here that's kind of important. For some reason, when you always need to do this chart when you're doing this, okay? Make this little chart up when you think it's a sex influence problem. It's the easiest way to work it, right? And usually they cross a bald female with a non-bald male and get to an F2 and ask you what's going on, but you need the middle chart. For some reason, what people do is they try to make this non-balding. I can't really write with my mouse, but they'll make that non-balding, and some reason they'll come down here and they'll make this balding. And then they try to work it, and it doesn't work. You can't, I don't know why people flip either the males or the females over. It's just, you can't do it that way. Follow what the alleles say. If you're homozygous for whatever the allele is, in this case bald, you better have it, right? You can't somehow lose it. It's the heterozygotes that are important. So don't flip those over. Be very careful about how you work with those. All right. So we've done this. We've talked about autosomal ones. So we have sex influenced and sex limited. Now in part 2 of this lecture, we're going to talk about sex linked. So we'll go from where you have everybody gets exactly the same genetic combination, which is true in the autosomes, to where you don't actually get the same genetic information when you talk about sex chromosomes. Before we get there, we're going to have to talk about sex determination. So actually part 2 is going to be how we determine sex, how we produce sex genetically, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what effects that has on the actual mode of inheritance, which is a new mode of inheritance. So here we've had 2 new modes of inheritance, right? Sex limited, sex influenced are 2 new modes. Eventually we'll get to the third involving sex, which is sex linked.